Today, we're going to dive deep into how the U.S. Delta Force captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro from a heavily fortified military base in Venezuela, while also breaking down the massive air campaign involving 150 aircraft in the skies. After that, we'll look into who's really calling the shots in this country after this earth-shaking event. First thing you gotta know is that the U.S. raid actually kicked off 4 months ago, with a phase they called Shaping Operation Stage 1. This operation got rolling in August of 2025 when a team of CIA officers was secretly slipped into Venezuelan territory. They put together detailed intelligence profiles, tracking every move of President Maduro hour by hour, while running a squad of stealth drones to send live, professional updates on his location. This covert op built what they call a pattern of life, a fancy intelligence term for daily habits. Thanks to that, the intel officers narrowed down Maduro's location to the Fort Tiuna military complex, a huge base just south of the capital, Caracas, where about 3 million folks live. Drop a comment with the number 1 if you're backing the United States. On Saturday, January 3rd, 2026, at 2 in the morning local time, under the cover of a quiet night, the U.S. government gave the green light for an operation codenamed Absolute Resolve. The U.S. military unleashed a series of precision missile strikes across the capital, Caracas. The bombs were launched from 20 different bases and warships. The ground assault team picked for the raid was the Delta Force, part of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment. What's wild is that FBI agents from the hostage rescue team were also deployed to handle Maduro's capture. The bold tactics used in the infiltration blew the minds of many military analysts. According to reports, 11 U.S. helicopters from the elite 160th Night Stalkers, a unit of daredevils who pull off crazy stunts in the air, were sent in to lead the raid. This crew, like stunt drivers but in choppers, carried about 300 special ops soldiers in the back. The team launched from the U.S. Navy's amphibious assault ship USS Uima, anchored just a couple of miles off the Venezuelan coast. They flew low, only about 100 feet above the Caribbean Sea to dodge enemy radar. Then, they crossed a dangerous 10-mile stretch over land from the northern coast to Fort Tiuna. During the journey, they came under fire. One chopper was reported damaged, but still operational. As the air assault flew over the capital, explosions echoed behind them, streamed live on social media platform X. The soldiers used MH-47G Chinook and MH-60 Leaders helicopters, special variants decked out with unique countermeasures. Storming the Fort Tiuna complex was an insanely risky mission. This base is guarded by solid concrete gates, bunkers carved into mountains with high firing positions, armed watchtowers, and round-the-clock patrol teams. It's like Venezuela's version of the Pentagon. You can tell the base was built into the mountainside for a height advantage for defenders, plus it's got deep underground capabilities. The perimeter is massive, about 2 miles wide and 4 miles long. Intelligence reports estimate around 5,000 of Maduro's top-tier troops were stationed there. Sources say Maduro constantly moved around the country, switching sleeping spots every night and using burner phones to avoid being tracked. But the base's defenses were partly knocked out thanks to prep work starting in mid-December 2025, when the U.S. Cyber Command targeted their electrical infrastructure, planting malware in their systems. When Cyber Command flipped the switch, the entire power grid at the base and most of the capital went dark, disrupting communications and making it nearly impossible to coordinate a response. So, the soldiers repelled from the helicopters, commandos hit the ground, and charged straight to the house inside the base where Maduro was hiding. U.S. General Kane said the assault team took direct fire, forcing American troops to respond with overwhelming force in self-defense. Intel officers embedded with the team helped navigate the complex. They tipped off the breaching squad about thick steel doors, protecting Maduro info straight from close sources in his inner circle. Maduro reportedly had a fully sealed safe room. So, the soldiers packed door-breaching explosives and power saws, ready to bust through. Meanwhile, outside, U.S. attack helicopters provided close air support, laying down suppressive fire. These were upgraded beast mode choppers, free to unleash hell with dual miniguns and hydro rockets. But then they started taking fire from enemy shoulder-fired Igla anti-air missiles. To counter, pilots deployed XM-216 dark flares invisible to the naked eye, but able to trick incoming missiles. Delta Force finally breached Maduro's hideout inside the base and found him. According to CNN, citing a source close to the op, the soldiers dragged Maduro out of bed, zip-tied his hands, and blindfolded him while he was still half asleep. Then, they escorted Maduro and his wife out, loaded them onto a Chinook helicopter, and started flying back. A Venezuelan military officer who leaked Maduro's location and acted as a CIA informant reportedly got a $50 million bounty. But that's only half the mission, because the special ops team still had to extract safely. Capturing Maduro alive was a hard requirement. If he got killed en route or during the withdrawal, it'd look like the US ordered an assassination mission, stirring up a legal mess. This is seen as one of the most geopolitically sensitive ops in recent history. They'd kicked a hornet's nest. The whole country seemed to be closing in on them. The question on every Delta soldier's mind on the way back was whether they could count on US air power to cover their retreat. On the way out of Venezuela, the US Air Force kept hitting strategic military sites across the country to create diversions, helping the Special Ops team escape safely. F-22 Raptor and F-35 stealth fighters, F-18S, radar planes, and B-1 Lancer bombers joined the strikes. They targeted bases across LaGuardia, Miranda, and Air Estates. This was meant to give the enemy a bunch of headaches. The success came from a simultaneous air campaign in the skies, achieving total air dominance. Reports say the op involved 150 U.S. fighter jets with the goal of complete and utter control of the airspace. The jets fired long-range precision missiles. Huge explosions rocked the capital. Local news reports in the native language said the blasts targeted anti-air radar antennas. This was a massive campaign to cripple enemy air defense systems. According to a source from Oceanet Defender ONX, the air campaign destroyed long-range Buck air defense systems and knocked out armored vehicles at bases. Since then, newly released satellite imagery has shown the extent of destruction at the base. Large sections were completely flattened. U.S. jamming tech scrambled enemy radar, and anti-radiation missiles took out S-300 air defense launchers. The reason they pulled this off is because they hit major air bases, including ones at El Carlo and Eagle Roa Airport, where Maduro's Air Force with MiG fighter jets could have taken off to stop them. We're seeing the aftermath of destroyed armored vehicles at the base here. Organizing a response was tough for these forces, because Fort Tiuna, this military hub, housed some of the highest-ranking military generals, and when it got hit, everything fell into chaos. In dictatorships, sometimes they keep all the military decision-makers centralized at one spot, which is handy for maintaining control. But the downside is it creates a single point of weakness or failure. Explosions also struck the port of Lagua, one of Venezuela's most strategic ports controlling cash flow tied to the regime. These shaping ops were designed to sow panic and disorientation among Maduro's forces. Because what stunned military observers about this attack was how helicopters took center stage. Combat footage shows Marine Viper helicopters and what looks like Army Apaches hitting ground targets with rockets. Normally, these rotorcraft are super vulnerable and exposed without ground support nearby. They move relatively slow and are often sitting ducks for enemy handheld anti-air weapons. Using them in this raid shows how confident U.S. war planners were that they'd have total air control at this point. But the question is, why weren't any U.S. helicopters shot down by some of the reported 5,000 handheld Igla launchers? How was the resistance so ineffective? There are tons of theories and answers, and this honestly takes us down a weird, almost conspiratorial path. The overwhelming combat firepower the U.S. amassed over the past 6 months made resistance tough. Plus, polls show Maduro wasn't popular, with approval ratings between 10 and 20%, because folks are fed up with the economic crisis and political repression in Venezuela. So, maybe few were willing to risk their lives to defend Maduro. Still, opposition sources in Venezuela told Sky News reporters that Maduro's capture was actually a negotiated exit, not a forced grab. Meaning, they claim Maduro knew the Americans were coming for him and agreed to it beforehand, and this ground assault was just an elaborate way for him to surrender to U.S. authorities. Why would he do that? For the domestic audience in Venezuela, theoretically, saying "I got captured by the Americans" sounds better than "I cut a deal and fled." What surprised experts is that Maduro's wife was taken along with him, because that's super unusual in military capture ops like this. Before, his wife wasn't under criminal indictment, and we've only just learned she's now also facing charges after the capture. Still, there's no concrete evidence of this, though a surrender deal might have been in play. His military forces wouldn't have known about it, and this doesn't fully explain the poor performance of Maduro's security forces. US President Trump declared, "We were ready to launch a second strike if needed. In fact, we assumed a second wave would be necessary, but now it might not be." Another theory is he was betrayed by a high-ranking figure in his regime, like the vice president or defense minister, who ordered the military not to resist Maduro's capture. Another possibility for the US forces pulling this off without losing a single chopper could be that modern US helicopters have electronic missile defeating systems. It's called direct infrared countermeasures, detecting, tracking, and firing a laser straight at the missile's seeker head, blinding it so the missile doesn't know where to aim. And this works against Iglo launchers. These launchers also need proper maintenance and training, which they apparently lacked. The 160th Unit also flew low to deny the enemy a clear line of sight or attack. According to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, the mission's success came from months of planning and rehearsals. Either way, the helicopters made it back safely across national territory to the waiting U.S. Navy fleet offshore, where a photo of Maduro was taken. There were no U.S. combat fatalities in the operation, though some soldiers were reportedly injured by gunfire and shrapnel, but nothing life-threatening. But now that Maduro's been captured, who's running Venezuela in the aftermath? This ain't as simple as your typical regime overthrow you might be used to. President Trump announced the U.S. government will oversee Venezuela during the aftermath of Maduro's capture. He said this'll last until there's a safe, reasonable, and fair power transition. The idea here is that a U.S. Navy oil blockade of Venezuela would, in theory, let the U.S. government control the Venezuelan regime no matter who's in charge there without actually putting boots on the ground. The U.S. government has stated they believe no further military action is needed in Venezuela. However, resistance forces have started forming in the country, which could challenge that. Venezuelan Interior Minister Cabello appeared on TV in the streets, wearing a hard hat and bulletproof vest, calling on citizens not to cooperate with the terrorist enemy. Right now, Rodriguez has just been sworn in as interim president there. And according to the US government, she's quietly cooperating because she's got no other choice. But in public messages, she's very defiant toward the US. What we know for sure is that the Venezuelan government is in chaos right now. They're calling on people to take to the streets, but so far, the response has been pretty quiet, no millions pouring out in rage. But what do the actual people, the regular folks living in Venezuela, feel about all this? Do they love it? Hate it? This is something we don't talk about enough. Looking at local news reports in Spanish on the situation, they say the reaction from Venezuelans is mixed, quoting, "People are expressing shock at the U.S. military strike, wondering who's really in charge of this oil-rich nation. Some celebrate the fall of a dictator. Other Maduro supporters roam with weapons, angry at what they see as American imperialism. Citizens hope that if Maduro is out of power, sanctions on the country might ease, and maybe the economy will get better. Others are skeptical about what'll happen in the power vacuum. But was all of this even legal to begin with? When the U.S. captured Saddam and Noriega, they had some kind of congressional approval. When the Libyan dictator was overthrown, they also had some congressional backing. This strike was carried out with no prior notice or authorization. What happens to Maduro from here? Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Maduro will face criminal charges in the U.S. related to drug trafficking in federal courts in New York City. But Maduro still insists he's innocent. Drop a comment with the number 1 if you support the United States.